This. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Daily Dose. We're excited to have our neighbor joining us today, neighbor and friend, Dean Wilson. But I have to be honest with you, I cannot call you anything but Mr. Wilson.
Well, there's two things. There could be the Dennis the Menace relationship, or I was raised the same way. I still have parents of students of mine that call me Mr. Wilson, and that's something we were taught at a young age about respect, and I appreciate that, even though it's Dean.
Yes. No, you were Quinn's principal in junior high, and I cannot do it. I just think of you as Mr. Wilson. Matt said to me this morning, "What is Mr. Wilson's first name?"
Actually, I've been called a lot worse, so trust me.
Well, we're really honored that you would join us, Mr. Wilson, because you are here to talk about, I think, maybe one of the worst imaginary scenarios of any parent's life, and that is having a child fall into addiction. Now, so that nobody watches this thing and is anxious the whole time, Aubrey is fully sober and doing well. So we're going to probably go to some dark places, but nobody needs to be concerned. Aubrey is great. In fact, Aubrey's joining us next week to talk about it from her perspective. So we feel really lucky to get to have these two sides of the same conversation. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So, Mr. Wilson, why don't you just sort of start where it started for you? I mean, were there things in Aubrey's growing up years that you can look back on and say, boy, that could have maybe been a sign for us had we been looking for something, or did it just seem to come out of nowhere?
That's just a great question. I all the time I look back, reflect back of why didn't we know? How didn't we know? And it was a lot of things. I was very blessed with four daughters, and they were the golden children, good students, did everything well. Well, Aubrey was. I always said it was like everybody loves Raymond. Everybody loved Aubrey. She had a lot of friends. And it was about up to eighth grade where it was. Everything was just really good, and then things had changed. And I'll just throw it in because once we found out way down the road is that she had very severe depression, and my wife and I were both in education, and we didn't see the trees for the forest. We thought everything was beautiful, and I think Aubrey put that on as everything was beautiful. So it was about eighth grade, and then being in education, things started to change about all the red flags that we talk about. From going in, transitioning into ninth grade, her friends had changed. She grades were dropping. She more kept to herself. She wasn't following our rules at the household. So things were just flipping on us slowly. The biggest thing that hit me up was a student came into my office and just very nervous. She wasn't a close friend of Aubrey's, but she knew her. And she came in and she was scared. I look back and I'm kind of an intimidating guy anyway, big guy. But anyway, she came in and she said, I have something to tell you. And I said, what? And she said, your daughter's using. And this is like ninth grade. And I'm going, you little stinker, how could you be mean like that to my daughter? And it wasn't, and I asked, will she use it? It wasn't just alcohol, it was meth. And this is ninth grade now, a few years back, that I look and I said, thank you. And she shut the door and I was angry. I go, you little brat, how could you make up stuff like that about my daughter? So that's how the journey kind of began, where denial, not the Wilson family, we're perfect and things are great. And it just flipped, So, I'll keep talking about it. So then things just started changing where she wouldn't come home. We'd tell her, you got curfew at 10 o'clock, and she wouldn't come home at 1 in the morning. She'd come home, if it was Friday, she'd come home Sunday. It was just bizarre. Like, we were thinking we were high jumping, we were pole vaulting already. Yeah. And it got so high up there, and I'm going, what is going on? And I would say to my wife, I go, she's got to be mentally ill. I mean, why would you not do that? And she was so defiant and so angry. And like I said, there was all these warning signs that we did not see ever, till after the fact.
Don't you think, Mr. Wilson, mean, I say the same thing. I can look back and say, are you kidding me? You didn't look at what was happening in your household and put two and two together. It was as plain as day in reflection. But when you're in it, I mean, I think your point is right. You're a good family. You are both in education. You're invested in your girls. You come from a great community, all these things. How could you possibly have a girl who made those choices? And so when that feels like that's your conclusion, then the answer has to be something different. It just has to be, because otherwise you have to confront something really terrible, and that's hard to do.
I think we're in denial for a long time, and we did a lot of things in our journey, from family therapy to obviously rehab with different places in our community. But the big fun was denial at first. And the denial was bizarre in the sense that played us against each other. Like, our biggest thing was, the biggest stress in our marriage was that one day Ann was supporting her and then I wasn't, or vice versa. And we were never on the same page at the same time. Now we got out to our extended family, where my mother-in-law and everybody's, and I felt like the bad guy, because you're overreacting. This isn't true. She's a kid. And so, and that was one thing we learned with counseling, is that Ann and I had to be together and pulling on the rope at the same time, because everybody has their bumps in their marriages, but that was a stressful time where I was done with everybody.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm done with everybody. I'm not sticking up for her. She is an addict and she's got problems.
We've not had a parent on talking about this, and so it's really insightful for me to think about, how would I have gone through something like this with another person who was my partner. So if Maz and I had to do it together with a third person, I mean, as isolated as I felt, at least I wasn't trying to also maintain marriage and active parenting. I mean, your other girls were young. You had a lot in your house.
I mean, and like I said, I can share so many stories of crazy stuff that, and I'll keep it PG in the sense of this podcast, but just bizarre things. And my four daughters today are so close, and it makes me warm and fuzzy and feeling that. But the one next to her, Aubrey, the one younger than her, I was surprised she ever forgave her.
Yeah.
Because we did things where urine tests, the other daughter would pee in the cup and bring it in. So Aubrey never tasted or tested positive on it, ever. So she go, I told you so. And things that I'll just throw out, I mean, bizarre stuff. I mean, I'll just throw it out because the parents are listening. I mean, she'd have the daughter urinate in a condom, and Aubrey would tuck it away. So when she went in the stall, she'd pour it out, and it kept with your body temperature. It passed all the tests, and she was always negative, and she'd slap at my face, told you so. And I never found out till later that the older daughter was telling the younger daughter, if you don't do it, you're in trouble. So she intimidated and scared her own sibling. And they forgive each other,
Yeah. Well, I think the truest thing is that the other side of addiction can be as powerfully positive as addiction is powerfully negative.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So how long did Aubrey's active using go on, Mr. Wilson?
I would say it was a long car ride that I didn't want to be on. I mean, it had to last at least over 5 years for sure.
Wow.
And like I said, I can story tell of crazy stuff. Like, I mean, I'm not a handyman. You might notice that living next to me. But I like when I go to Mills Fleet Farm, if a drill is on sale for $100 on the regular $250, I'd buy it. Well, all these tools I don't use all the time, we had tons of stuff gone.
Oh.
Yeah.
And then I found out later, I never went to the pawn the store, and there was like 82 interactions of selling stuff. And I had like a chainsaw brand new. Why wouldn't it? What a perfect thing to sell. So those are things that went on for a long time. We never gave her money. You know what I mean? And I've learned, like I said, not to throw Aubrey on the bus, but we learned so many things that, like what bothered me is we finally got her in for mental health issues and to get her on the right medicine, and Adderall, for instance, what a great drug to sell on campus at
Oh.
campuses where college students would buy them.
Yeah.
And and I couldn't remember what I'd be making it up, but you got 30 tablets at $10 a pop. That's $300 that she could pocket and do things. So she learned to navigate her addiction. And we learned that we change our styles too. We wouldn't, if we're going to buy beer, we'd buy a 6-pack. We wouldn't buy a couple cases if we had friends over. We'd change our ways because things were gone. They were always missing.
Yeah.
And I thought I was losing my marbles about things we were missing, but she learned to navigate and she took care of her friends because they all hung out with each other.
Yeah.
I'd have kids in our basement sleeping and I thought it was a sleepover. And then I found out they're in our basement for a couple of weeks because they were runaways. They found each other and and she was covering up. I'd lock her, I shouldn't say lock her down, I'd put her down in her basement and how naive was I where that back window was open all the time. It was like a highway of people coming in and out of that window. And I thought, what a good girl. She's in her basement. She's staying in her room. She's following our instructions. It was a Friday night. And I go, you're not going out. And she goes, okay. We go to her basement. I go to Ann. I go, boy, what a following, cooperating. And she'd boogie out,
Well, what was the turning point for all of this? How did you go from all of that to where you are today?
Wow, I think one thing we learned, like I said, we went to counseling, and I can name the organizations, which I won't here, but we reached out. I mean, I talked about that's what I do for a living, is talk to families, and if to the end of the speech would be the silver lining is where I can try to guide families if they have similar problems. And it was, I'm at a middle school, I'm not at a high school, and it started that early, but things turned around where we knew we had to fix certain things. One is the addiction. Two was her mental health problems, where we brought her in. She, there's so many different medicines out there to finally find the one that worked right to get her in a good place. And she was depressed and down, and she used street drugs to make herself feel good.
Yeah.
And we never noticed it. She was always up and bubbly. And, I made a comment to her once and she laughed at me where I said, at least you didn't come home high. I mean, you're always straight when you came home. And she laughed at me. She said, Dad, I was high all the time in front of you. And I didn't see it. I couldn't smell anything, and then there's warning signs that we had, like she'd come home and crash. She'd sleep for a day and a half and stuff. Her safe place. She was paranoid on certain things. And she ran with people that were terrible. Like, I'm connected in the community because of my coaching, and I get a hold of lawyers, police, and they tell me information. She's running with this person, that person. They're a big dealer in the city. And I'm going, she was messing with big people.
Yeah. So how long has she been sober?
I think, I kind of lose track of time, I would say, this sounds terrible, but Ann and I chit-chatted about this morning, is the good and the bad. I'm not promoting this, but it was always a good thing when she was pregnant.
Oh.
She had, my grandson who's 10 now. So I would say 10 years where.
Phoenix is 10?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Wow. Wow, we really did lose some time during COVID. My gosh.
But and we prayed all the time, is that with prenatal and stuff, that she's behaving. And we were just so fortunate where we could help her more is when she had bumps in the road.
Yeah.
Where she was in low income housing and she's on her own. We didn't, because she lived with us for a while with Phoenix, but then she got kicked out. And being dad, I went in there, I go, I can fix it. I mean, she was behind like 5 months rent, and I go, I can fix it. It was low income housing. It wasn't that big of a deal financially, but it was a blessing because they wouldn't let me pay it. They kicked her out. But then we found out is that she was misbehaving, and so everything, it seemed like it fell in our laps where it helped her, where we get pushed in a direction. I'm going, we got to do this, we got to do that, so we could get things better.
Boy, It feels like some of the success, not to discount the work that Aubrey has done or the work that you have done as a family, but some of it is also living in a small community and in a place where we must have decent resources for people to get help if they want it and can get to it.
There is a lot of things out there, and you've got to reach out. And like I said, there was some programs that I professionally and professionally, I have to promote. Personally, I didn't think it was strong. Things that I will throw out because I think I'll stick strong on my opinions on is when you get help, it can't be short term. And it's not if you go to a rehab place for a month, that's just a hiccup in the addiction. I mean, it's too quick. And there's programs out there that were amazing. I know the one, and I'll brag about it. I don't think it's around anymore, but it was Sisters Path, where she was there for about a year and a half. And Mr. Lopez, who passed away, he was an amazing man. I always brag about him. He was the president, I think, of the program, but it was a year and a half, and they had their own apartment. I think it was sponsored by somebody in the community where she could go there, and she had to do every morning. They checked that it was super clean, the apartment. If she left the building, she had to get tested again. My grandson went to daycare, and she went to counseling, and then we did family counseling. And if you've ever been to intense family counseling with other families there, I mean, I leave there with a migraine headache. I'm going, well, we thought we were messed up or off.
Oh man, isn't that the,
That
yes,
is the truth.
you do get some incredible perspective when you get into a group. Not that you want to find how you can be in less bad shape than someone else, but it is remarkable what some people live with.
So what do you think the turning point was? I mean, you said when getting pregnant was a blessing. What finally got her to say, you know what, I need help? What was that?
I think, they always talk about hitting rock bottom, and I go, I don't know what rock bottom is, because there was times where, like I said, they'd pull somebody out of the Red River and they'd say it was a male, and I go, thank goodness it was a male. I didn't know. And then the rock bottom, the turning point, I think it was just about the support we had. It was just constantly going and going and going. I remember a police officer told me, I mean, I laugh when you have your house surrounded by 5 squad cars in your neighborhood, and everybody's mowing their grass and it's winter. Everybody's outside watching it. And I go, really? You need 5 squad cars outside our house to find out where she's at? Because she was running with some difficult people. But police officer said, you want to help her out so she doesn't get too deep in the sense of, I was connected with some lawyers, and so she never got a felon, and she never was ever charged for anything, but she was always in the mix of things. And I always told people, I go, I don't know if I'm watching too much TV where she's at a house, there's a raid, and I go, that's not her house. So there's things like that. And I had good advice from a lot of people that, Dean, stay strong. She even went to jail for 2 days, a bunch of these gals. And my friend who's a lawyer said the bail was $100. I told them my lawyer told me, put the bail at $10,000, so she can't get out. So I went to visit her, and you learn a lot of things about jail. You can only have 1 visitor per day, and there had already been a visitor, so I couldn't even see her. But I finally got in there. Well, one day I go there, and she's not there anymore. The person that was one of the dealers bailed her out cash. She wasn't there anymore. He bailed her out.
Wow.
So I go to my lawyer. I go, 10,000, bailed her out. I go, what the heck? Because he didn't want her to turn on him, telling you this information. And this is all pretty heavy stuff, but it was real. But the turning point, Miles, like you said, that I think just never giving up, keep working on it. And it was exhausting.
Yeah.
I told Ann this is that, and this is a tough one for me, because Ann goes, you're going to say that on the air? And I said, I might. There was a time where if she had passed, it would have been easier.
We have some other people who've said that too.
Because it was a car ride. It was so stressful, and it was juggling elephants. I was working, I was finishing up my master's degree, and it was craziness. And I remember staying at work. How bad is this? Staying at work was better than going home, because it was always drama at home. Yeah. It was something. She didn't come home. She took this, she did that. And then things surface now, like I'm a little finicky, where I'd be going, my car seat was off, and she'd sneak out at night and take my vehicle. Never knew that till like 2 years ago. She'd take it out in there, load it up, having fun. And I got nervous because I'm all paranoid. I'm Canadian. I go across the border a lot. I don't need something stashed or hidden in my car that I'm not aware of.
No.
Yeah.
Explain that, you know. So
Yeah.
it was, but we just were persistent. We tapped in everything I thought in my job I could tap into
Yep.
of every organization, and I could run them down. And the biggest one that, well, I'll brag about. I'll just brag about the good things, you know. That my daughter went to Dakota Memorial, what it's called. It used to be Boys and Girls Ranch before.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, and she was in there for 6 months, and I think that saved her life. She couldn't go anywhere. It was like a kid's dorm, and she couldn't go anywhere. And she was a staker. She held out for 2 months there where she was the brat. She wouldn't listen, but then it was tight. She had to go back to her room. They'd go, you know, they'd go movie night, and they'd take them all to a movie. And she goes, "You're not going to a movie. You're going back to your room. You wouldn't clean up. You wouldn't cooperate." And finally, about 2 months, she broke, you know, and we go to meetings, and, you know, and I still remember she blew in a snot and a rag, you know, smeared it on my face in front of the counselor. And she goes, I'm only here for them. And then I'll back it up with the group sessions we went to at Sisters Path. I still remember that she got up and they said, you know, "What do you think for Flora?" And she said, "I'm only here because my parents want me here." And this guy out of the corner, he was probably 20 years younger than me, but looked about 20 years older. He stands up and he said, "You little blankety blank, your parents are the only ones that come here every week for your session. You're a spoiled brat." And she stormed out mad, and the counselor said, "Let her go." And it seemed like that was a turning point where other people were speaking up, going, "You know what? You got to get it together, girl."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, like I said, it was a journey, like, and I could ramble, we could be on for hours on this, because I've spoken before. I've made people laugh, and I made people cry. I mean, I'm rambling on, but, you know, another one was, she calls me up and she goes, "Dad, I need a one-way ticket home from Oklahoma City." And I go, "Why are you in Valley City?" She goes, "I'm not in Valley City. I'm in Oklahoma City." And I bought her a kid car, and I've learned this: don't put your title in your car if you own it, because she gave the car to another guy and he kept it. I've never seen the car since.
Wow.
You know? And I had to get her home, and then I called a place that I knew, and they networked down in Oklahoma, and they go, "He owns the car now." She signed it over to him. You know, so I tell anybody, you own your car, don't put be proud that you own it in the glove box, keep it out, because there's
Wow.
nothing I could do. So I gave away a kid car that, I don't know if it was 6,000, 4,000, but that's one example of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
You know, but we, like I said, with Maz's question, you know, we just kept being persistent. And then once she got on medicine, and the right medicine, and got level-headed, she could process it that was wrong, and that we loved her.
Yeah.
And then she started healing, where she goes, you know, and I told her, you can't, you know, we have history of alcoholism on both sides of the family. And I told her, I go, you just can't do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's a hard lesson, because it is so prevalent in our culture. It's such a given that people will drink, that even knowing everything we know about it, it's so comfortable in the culture that it really makes it hard, I think, for people to not fall into that trap, even when they know they shouldn't. And that's whether you've got a history of it, whether you have a past personally. It's such an odd thing. I never walk away from these guest Thursday conversations and think, you know what's great? It's great that we have unlimited access to alcohol. And,
Yeah.
and alcohol is a fine thing if you can manage it. But boy, if you can't, it's a terrible, terrible thing.
I think one of the worst things, and you mentioned it too, is it's great that Audrey's on the right medication.
Yeah.
I've met quite a lot of the people I was in rehab with were in the same boat. They were diagnosed with some
Bipolar depression,
depression, and they were on the right medication because it was taken care of in the hospital.
Mhm.
And one of the downsides of it being an AA place is, you know, you never knew anyone's you didn't know anything about anyone. You just knew what their first name was. So I if they don't go to AA meetings, I don't see them. So I've got no idea how well these people did. You know, all right, they're on the right medication now. When they get released because they're feeling better,
Will they
do
stay
they
on it?
get insurance that'll pay for this medication? I mean, how much is this medication that's keeping them straight? That's what I always worry about.
You know, and I learned so much, you know, like she'd go like the Adderall, she'd go, I lost it, Dad. So I'd call the doctor, and the doctor, they're savvy, you know, like first time they gave me another bottle of 30 tablets. The second time she goes, she's not losing them. You know, and then, you know, I always have catchphrases, you know, if you get drunk alone at your house, you're an alcoholic, but if you get drunk with a bunch of people, it's a party.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fun, it's good, it's all
Yeah.
acceptable. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And those are the things that you learn. And I have opinions. I always tell people, and I buy a lottery ticket once in a while when it's like up to 300 million, because that would be enough money. But I would like to put a big percent to rehab places. Like there was things that I observed, and when Aubrey went to NAAA, it was an older crowd, and I didn't like it, because then all of a sudden and I'm a protective dad, you know, where some 55-year-old male wants to go out for coffee with her, you know, and I'm going, does he just want a coffee with her, or does he want something more as a protective dad? So I always thought there was never a middle road of a younger group of students, and you know, I'm not on the pulse of all this, of the NAA and AA, so I don't want to overspeak, but there was things that different rehabs in different places, you know, with you know, Sisters Path was a place that you could bring a child, you know, and these are the programs that they're very expensive to keep going. And that's what always drove me nuts. You know, I'm fortunate where I've got great insurance, but we have many families, you know, that I've dealt with, you know, in my business where they have nowhere to go because they have no means, they have no money. And how do you get help? And I've seen kids in our community that mentally ill walking the streets. And I go, I had them as a student. And how do you help them? You know, they don't have that support.
Yeah, you and I know one together, a boy from Quinn's class who's just a mess. And I mean, I don't even know if he's still alive, but he will live a very, very short life, I'm sure, because he's clearly got mental health issues. He had them as an elementary age kid, and they just have gone diagnosed, and he just has fallen into a terrible path. And it's heartbreaking because it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, you know, in my tenure, and I don't, like I said, overspeak a little bit, but you know, on the news now, and I talk to police weekly, you know, for sure about what's the pulse of the city, what's going on. I mean, it's skyrocketed right now in our community with overdoses. You know, I mean, it's amazing as me as an administrator being trained in Narcan, and they say everybody should have that in your cabinet at home, just like you would have aspirin, you know?
Yeah.
And then, you know, over the years, and like I said, I don't want it's fresh for a lot of people, but probably at least 5 students that we've had that have passed because of drug overdoses. And it's just for a different time. I tell my kids all the time, you know, they're constantly about, you know, making good choices. And, you know, I'll pick on vaping. That's out of control now. And you don't know what's in that. If it's just tobacco, or they call it THC, honey oil, you don't know. I mean, and more. So it's our society now, and pandemic hasn't helped. Depression, violence, anxiety is up 300%, and it didn't miss North Dakota.
No,
It's here, and we see in our community of just stressors. I see a lot of people tight and stressed out.
Yeah, it's a scary time. Well, Mr. Wilson, let's do a quick wrap up on where Aubrey is today from your perspective and those babies of hers. She made you a grandpa. So give us the 1 minute happy ending to this really, really remarkable story.
Well, you know, the good is that she went to school, you know, and she just needs a couple more credits to finish. I always call it Morehead State, Maz, but
that's where I went to.
Everyone, my mother-in-law refers to it as Morehead State. That's what.
Anyway, she's got a social degree. You know, she's working full time, and she's perfect because she's, like I said, everybody loves Raymond. There's not a person I know that doesn't love Aubrey. She is so amazing. You go to a family reunion, she talks to everybody. She's
well, you've met her parents, right, Mr. Wilson?
What's that now?
You've met her parents, right?
Exactly. Well, I've learned that too, is I'll throw out, you know, like we get that a lot of times from people, the apple from the tree. A lot of times the tree's fine. The tree's fine. I'll see, and especially with people that don't have children, I'm going, back up here. Just because they did wrong things. Because I've had many parents in my office, teary-eyed, want the best. And there's nothing wrong with them. And kids will do kids things, what I call age appropriate, not appropriate behavior, but when is it beyond that?
Yeah.
You know, and that's where you get dialed in. But she's doing fine. She's working full-time, social worker. She's actually expecting right now for her third.
She is.
She is.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's due in December, but I hope December 28th, because that's a special day in my birthday.
Yes, it is.
But she's, you know, she has, my granddaughter will be 2, Amara. She lives with a gentleman that, you know, I call them the kids today. They don't do everything in the batting order you want them to do, like getting married. But he's a great guy, he's supportive, and takes care of her in the sense of the stability of emotionally and, you know, social emotionally. And she lives relatively close, maybe too close, if you know what I mean. I mean, they're over all the time, but it's a good thing. Like I tell people, I'm happy when they're over and I'm happy when they leave, you know. But she's doing really well, you know. And it's, you know, I'm scared all the time. It's day to day.
Yeah.
It's day to day. You talk about triggers and urges, and I worry about it every day. And then I worry about my other 3 daughters, because we learned through counseling is that we forgot about them. You know,
Yeah.
we neglected them. You get so focused on the one that you forget. I remember I'll talk about Julia once, where in counseling they said, tell her that because she doesn't make her bed, she's not going to jail. And Julia, I remember telling her that once, she just bawled. Like, I go, wow, this is heavy. Like, I never knew she thought that way. So we had so much focus on Aubrey, we forgot about the other 3.
Yeah.
And Ann and I together. You know, there was times there, it was so stressful. It was what it was, but then we learned to work together. And I'm blessed, like I said, with a wife that's so laid back and understanding that I'm a little more militant and we got to do this, this, and this. And we kind of fall into balance with it. But Aubrey's doing great. And like I said, she's great at her job. I mean, you know, when it's funny is she's been there, done that, and understands people, and you know, and she's savvy. Like she'll say things to me. I'm going, we'll be somewhere, and you go, see that guy over there? He's high right now. And I'm going, we're at a restaurant. I really don't care about the guy over there, but she's very observant of different things and good insights. And she's the oldest daughter too, trying to watch out for her sisters too.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this has been a remarkable
It has
story.
been,
Thank you for
absolutely.
sharing with
Thank
us.
you.
Yeah, when you told after Maz and I came out with our story and you told me this, it was incredible because I've known you for 15 years, which means you were going through this since
Mhm.
we've known you and we had no idea, which is just another one of those examples of how isolating all of this can feel because you just don't talk about it. Sometimes there's not time, sometimes there's not energy, but there's also just the fear of what will people think if they know that this is happening in our house. So thanks for coming on and
Yes,
sharing
thank
this.
you.
It's an amazing story.
Well, I appreciate, like I said, a good dysfunctional family doesn't show anything, you know, but I've had people reach out and I'll throw it out there as a resource because I've learned this is what you do. I'll never tell anybody that because many times you got to take 3 steps backwards to move 1 step forward. And it's a tough journey and it's more prevalent than you think. And it's, like I said, my going down this highway, this path, it's a journey that I never thought I'd ever do and ever want to do and hopefully never have to do again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I wish that for you and for us
Yeah,
and
me
for
too.
everybody who has been down it.
And I appreciate you having me on here and I appreciate what you're doing. And like I said, we're fortunate. We have great neighbors. So
Yes, we do.
do.
Well, we'll see you in the neighborhood, Mr. Wilson. Thanks so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.
have a great day and thanks for having me.
you soon.
Absolutely. Everybody else, we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.